Good morning, Year 3. Welcome back to our first reading lesson of week 2. And of course, the reading comprehension will continue to be on poetry. So the ally today is to answer literal and inference questions. Before we start, remember the normal routine: pencil or pen and paper, and you're in charge of the pause button. Today we are going to look at a new poem, and it's called a free verse poem. It's called a free verse poem because it doesn't follow any rules. So it doesn't necessarily have any rhythm or any rhyming words. It's totally up to the poet to decide how they want to write. And you can see the illustration of the poem down below. It's set out according to how someone feels they want to make that poem appear. So before we have a listen to the free verse poem for today, let's start with our quiz. So I'm going to start the quiz. Remember, the focus this week, like on Friday, was similes and metaphors, but there's a strong emphasis today on similes. So they are poetic devices or techniques that you will be using this week. So let's have a look at the first question. Simile or metaphor? My sister is like an angel in my life. Simile or metaphor? My brother was boiling mad. Simile or metaphor? My life is a dream. Simile or metaphor? He is a night owl because he stays up late. That's a bit like my son, who's 18. He tends to stay up very late. Now that's our next one is simile or metaphor. This house is as clean as a whistle. And finally, this is the second to last. Simile or metaphor. My father is a bear in the morning. Hopefully your father isn't a bear in the morning. And simile or metaphor. Maths is like a puzzle that never ends. So how do you think you did on those? Today we're going to do something different. And we're just going to have a quick discussion. If you've already done these, as I was showing them, then you'll be ready to mark them. So let's mark number 1. My sister is like an angel in my life. Well, that is a simile because it has the word like in there, because they're comparing the sister to an angel. Number 2, my brother was boiling mad. Well, there's no like or as in this sentence, so therefore it must be a metaphor. So you're comparing the brother to a boiling mad person. So boiling is very, very hot, which goes with anger. So that's definitely a metaphor. Number 3, my life is a dream. Well, there's no like or as in this sentence, so it must be a metaphor. Number 4, he is a night owl because he stays up late. Well, once again, there's no like or as in this sentence, so therefore it's a metaphor. This house is as clean as a whistle. Well, we've got the word as in there twice, so it's definitely a simile. My father is a bear in the morning. Once again, there's no like or as. So this is a metaphor. And the last one, maths is like a puzzle that never ends. So that sentence has like in it, so therefore it's a simile. Well, you should have checked yours by now. So how did you do? Let's move on to our poem. So you can see the poem. There's no verses, it's just one long poem set out as it is, as you can see. So let's listen first of all to the reading of this poem.
Swoosh, boom, crunch, howl. The sun rises higher and higher, like a blossoming flower as the children play. Beach, beach, beach. The zephyr catches my skin like a wide receiver playing football. swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. The crashing waves sound like a head-on collision. Boom, boom, boom. Sand crunches under my feet like cereal in my mouth. Crunch, crunch, crunch. The salty water is carried with the wind. Howl, howl, howl. The gulls soar higher than the clouds. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. The child crashes to the ground like a rock slide. Boom, boom, boom. The man walks on shells that feel like needles. Crunch, crunch, crunch. The dog is angered by the birds. Howl, howl, howl. The kite flutters like a plane. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. The afternoon thunder blasts like a cannon. Boom, boom, boom. The child snacks on some chips that sound like glass. Crunch, crunch, crunch. The night has fallen and the coyotes holler like babies. Howl, howl, howl. The sun rises again, higher and higher, like a blossoming flower as the children play. Beach, beach, beach.
Well, there you have it. Before we do the reading comprehension task, let's first have a look at reading comprehension strategies. So here, before you answer the questions, one good strategy is to read the questions twice, especially if you don't understand the question. And then you can use the 3W approach. Who, what, where and when. Who's in the poem, who did it, who is with them, and what are they doing, what other characters are in the poem. And the third W, where are the characters, where are the characters in regards to each other, where are they going, where is the place that they're in. And then the next one, find the right page or section. Make sure that you use the text carefully. So you'll only find the answer you're after if you're on the right page or looking at the right verse or on the right line. And I have mentioned this during last week about scanning and skimming. So sometimes if you're looking for one word, you'd be skimming the page or the verse or the paragraph looking for that particular word, because last week we talked about keywords in a question. So once you know the keyword, like dragonfly, you would just be searching for that word, no other word. So you can go much quicker than if you were scanning. Scanning takes much longer, but those are two very, very important observation skills that you need to develop. Skim, you're looking for some specific word or phrase, and scan, you're really checking out the whole page, so you have to go much slower because you're trying to build up an understanding of the text. And then sometimes the questions, especially this week, you have to read around the information. You don't always find the answers in the text. You have to use the information you have and then think, now why did that dog get angry with the birds? Because in the poem it doesn't tell you. So you have to work it out. Why would the dog be angry with the birds? And then last of all, you can write down your answer, but check your answer once you've written it. Does it make sense? Did you actually answer the question? Okay, now let's look at the poem. I've broken the poem up in half because it'd be far too much information for you to try and look at all at once. So just remind you about the ally to answer literal and inference questions. So literal questions you can find in the text. Inference questions, you have to read around the information. So let's have a look at things to think about. Well, you do need to think about this poem very carefully, and I've put the word repetition. Now you can see there are lots of words in there that are repeated. So there's repetition of beach, beach, beach. And then below that, 2 lines down, swoosh, 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 boom, 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 crunch, 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 howl, howl, howl. Now, why does the poet want you to see those words? Well, they want to draw your attention to what's happening in the poem. Goes with the action. And we've come across all of those words before, onomatopoeia, but the next thing we need to think about is similes. Now, similes hopefully will give you a picture in your mind or an image in your mind of what is happening. Like sun rises higher and higher like a blossoming flower. Or crashing waves sound like a head-on collision. Sand crunches under my feet like cereal in my mouth. Child crashes to the ground like a rock slide. So hopefully you can imagine what's happening when you read those sentences. And that's the point of similes. And we've done quite a bit of work on onomatopoeia, and you know there are quite a few onomatopoeic words in this poem, which I've highlighted in green. I forgot to do the ones at the just below the title of the poem. But you can see I highlighted them in green. I didn't highlight beach, 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 because beach is a noun, and it's not an example of onomatopoeia. But the beach tells you where the children are playing. Okay, and then we've got a structure to this poem that we have to think about. Now it's got sun rises, zephyr catches. Now what happens here is this poem generally starts with a noun followed by a verb. So sun is the noun and rises is the action that's taking place, so it's the verb. And zephyr is the noun and catches is the action. So that's how this poem tends to work. And then I've got below that vocabulary and punctuation. Right, before we move on to punctuation, you can see up here we've got word meanings. If you have a piece of writing, there are possibly words that you do not understand. So I've given you the word zephyr, because if you don't know what zephyr is, that means that you won't understand what's going on in that third line or fourth line. So zephyr is a gentle wind or breeze. Okay, so we could rephrase that sentence and say the wind or breeze catches my skin like a wide receiver playing football. And of course, wide receiver is going to be a word that you're not aware of, but it's an American football player. And what happens is you have these men all lined up, maybe 10 or 12 in a line, and one person behind them, they pass the ball to him, and then he throws the ball to one of the players who is not in that front line, but wide out on the field, and he throws the ball to them. And that's why he's called a wide receiver. And then we've got the word collision, which I've got in red and underlined. I did that because it's a word that I wanted to discuss so that you definitely understand it. And I couldn't highlight it in blue because it's part of the simile. So collision, well, some synonyms for collision, if you're not aware, are crash, knock, accident, could be bang as well. So trying to build up your vocabulary is very useful and helpful. And the last word meaning I have there is soar. Soar is another word for fly up or rise on the wind. So I'm going to read the sentence where we find soar, which is in blue. The gulls soar higher than the clouds. Well, birds generally like to fly very high up in the sky. And they can do that especially if there's a warm breeze. So the zephyr is not only a gentle breeze, but it tends to be a warm breeze. So they rise up on these warm breezes or wind, and they climb very, very high up into the sky. So that's what soar means, to fly up or rise on the wind. Punctuation, you can see here, well, it's like most poems that we've looked at, they all start the sentences all start with capital letters, but you'll notice there are some dots after, like collision, mouth, wind, clouds, and slide. Well, that is called ellipses. So you have to the poet's leaving you to decide or think about what's happened. That's probably a simple way of explaining it. But that's the only real punctuation in this particular poem. Unlike The Collector, we had the beginning and there was a full stop at the end. And there was full stops in 3 lines, and that controls how you read the poem. So let's move on to the questions. Right. Analysing the poem is important, so you need to look at those words. Which words do you not understand? If you need to get a dictionary, you need to use Google. It's a good idea. It helps you to understand the written text far better. So A, why is the word beach repeated in line 2? Why do you think the word beach is in line 2? We talked about beach at the beginning. Remember, I said it was a noun. Why beach, beach, beach? Why did the poet use the word beach 3 times? Repetition. B, list 2 examples showing the use of similes. Well, you're quite lucky because I've highlighted the similes. C, which adjectives describe the waves and water? So remember, adjectives are describing words. So which adjectives describe the waves and water? D, which verb shows what the gull is doing? Remember, a verb is a doing or action word. And E, what happens to the child? So once again, think about keywords. Keywords like waves, water, gull, child. You can skim the text, find that specific word, so you can locate the information really quickly. So in that question, child is the key word, so you're going to skim the text. You may remember seeing it, and it won't take you long to find it. And F, what time of the day is it? Use the text as evidence. What time of the day is it? So once again, you have to use the information. You're not told exactly what time of the day it is. And G, list 3 words that show us that the poet uses their senses. Things like hearing, sight, touch. Is there anything else? There's something else I missed out. I'm going to let you think about that. Okay, once again, use the pause button if you need to. I'm going to continue with the lesson. So remember, use the text to help you. You need evidence to support your answers. So I'm going to move on to part 2 of the lesson. So we've got the second half of Swoosh Crunch, and I'll read it very quickly. The man walks on shelves that feel like needles. Crunch, crunch, crunch. The dog is angered by the birds. Howl, howl, howl. The kite flutters like a plane. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. The afternoon thunder blasts like a cannon. Boom, boom, boom. The child snacks on some chips that sound like glass. Crunch, crunch, crunch. The night has fallen and the coyotes holler like babies. Howl, howl, howl. The sun rises again higher and higher, like a blossoming flower as the children play. Beach, beach, beach. Right, so I've brought everything up here. Words that I've highlighted in blue. Word meanings, well, if you're not sure about flutters, well, flutters, if you're flying a kite, of course, if it's in the air, it's flying in the air, but we would use the word hover, or we could use the word dance or flit or flutter. Now, if you fly a kite, and if it's windy or very windy, you'll hear the noise of the wind hitting the kite. So it will make that fluttering sound. So it's to hover in the air or dance or flit about. Flit about means to move backwards and forwards. If you've ever flown a kite, you'll know what I'm talking about. Right, the word below that is coyote. In America, they have a small animal which is a very small prairie wolf, and it's very similar to a dog. So it's related to the wolf family, and the wolf family are part of the dog family. And the last word is holler. If you've not heard that word before, coyotes holler. Well, they bark very loudly. So holler means to bark or shriek or howl or cry out or to shout. So understanding the meaning of words that you don't know is important because it'll help you with understanding the text. Okay, so your final questions for this second half of the poem. Why do the shells feel like needles? Why do the shells feel like needles? And once again, you have to read around the information. There's no direct answer. It's not literal. You have to think about it and then work out why the shells feel like needles. B, why do you think the birds are making the dog angry? And once again, you need to read around the information. Think about dogs, think about birds. Why is the dog going crazy? And C, what does the phrase night has fallen mean? Does it mean that night's fallen over? What do you think? If you're not sure about night has fallen, you can locate it in the text. Remember the keywords? Well, night has fallen would be a phrase that you could skim for, just like you could skim for the word birds and dog and needles. D, the poet has repeated line 1 and line 2 at the end of the poem. Why does he do this? So at the beginning, it had the sun rises again higher and higher, like a blossoming flower as the children play. Beach, beach, beach. Now those two sentences are found at the beginning or at the beginning of the poem. In fact, there's line 2 and 3. So why does the poet repeat those two lines? So remember, the LI is to answer literal and inference questions. And once again, email your work to yr3@grange.harrow.school.uk. Good luck with your work on similes and answering literal and inference questions. Bye for now.